My academic case study is about effective discipline for misbehavior in school versus out-of-school suspension by Neil Bloomberg, Department of Education and Human Resources at Villanova University. This case study is about in-school suspension versus out-of-school suspension. Overall, the main problem is how to know which technique is more effective. Although there are many articles with pros and cons to each of these, most show that in-school suspension is the most effective. Some topics of discussion are on out-of-school suspension is Kostenbader and Markson S.'s 1997 article. It examined the responses of 252 students who have been suspended during their school career. A large majority of students feel that suspension was of little use, and over half of that reporting a feeling of anger instead of remorse. This study suggests that out-of-school suspension may not meet the needs of students with behavior problems. The most important issue related to out-of-school suspension is that it tends to push away the very students who need the most support from it, says Skibba and Peterson in their 1997 article. My opinion on that is depending on what the severity is of the behavior, should depend on which technique to use. Out-of-school suspension is not always the best technique because some people have bad home lives and leaving them at their house is just going to make it worse. School is sometimes their getaway from their house. In-school suspension. The most positive thing about in-school suspension is that it keeps the students in the classroom environment, making it possible for school officials to both punish inappropriate behaviors and to intervene in a positive manner with students, says Adams in the 1992 article. Also, the adoption of the in-school suspension program does not usually result in the elimination of out-of-school suspension. That goes back to the depending on the severity of the actions. And that should also play a huge role. Of course, if somebody is fighting and just being out of control and there's nothing you can do about it, of course you're going to have to suspend them outside of school. But if it's just like tardiness or not doing your homework and stuff like that, in-school suspension will be the most effective. I believe that in-school suspension should be monitored and they should be made to do extra assignments. Doing that will make a greater outcome of the effectiveness. I think that if you give them a chance to actually try harder and get one-on-one attention, sometimes behavior issues aren't just stuff that happens at school. Some people are showing out for attention because of their home life is bad. Most people don't necessarily, depending on how you think, depends on the severity that you think somebody's behavior is. To me, my kids are wild, but them yelling and playing ain't a behavior issue that I want to address. Whereas somebody who is more quick and completely business professional, they wouldn't want a child screaming around them. It depends on the environment mainly. Not all of the reports for in-school suspension shows that it was the most effective. The main thing is when to apply in-school suspension and when to apply out-of-school suspension. More prominent case studies have examined large school districts to try and determine the effectiveness of in-school suspension. In a large-scale report of a district in Iowa, it's 10 public middle schools and 5 public high schools. The positive effect of in-school suspension is noted by the fact that out-of-school suspensions were severely reduced because the district goal was to make half of all suspensions in school, says Pryor and Tuller in their 1991 article. The report lists the enthusiasm that several faculty and staff members had towards the initiative, with one vice principal saying, obviously, in-school suspension is a productive alternative to out-of-school suspension. I know it has an impact on students. When I hear students talk about their in-school suspension experience, they often mention something about the counsel they received. That was on page 15 of their article. I think that if your attitude in in-school suspension, like the faculty's attitude on in-school suspension is good, then their overall outcome is good. If you're more positive and more apt to help somebody, then they're more apt to help themselves.